everyone. I'm Annalisa Pesic. Welcome to today's program, hosted by the New American Magazine. In thinking about today's program and the conversation we're going to have with David Giglio in a few moments, I was thinking of a title, States You Don't Want to Move to. And that would include Washington State, California, Oregon, New York, all of these Democrat-run states where life seems pretty miserable. But then I thought that's exactly what they want us to do. They want us to leave these states, or they don't want us to stay and fight. And one of the brave fighters that I have the honor of hosting on the show today is running for Congress in the House of Representatives for California's 16th district. His name is David Giglio. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see you. California craziness.
Yes, it's funny you said states you don't want to move to. Well, actually, I'm actually not native to California, so I actually moved here. So I moved from Connecticut about 4 years ago. My wife got her dream job at Valley Children's Hospital, which is a very well established and well thought of hospital here in the Central Valley. They treat children, patients from all over, Central California. And, we love it out here. And when people think of California, they don't really think of the Central Valley. They're thinking of beaches in LA and San Francisco. But the Central Valley is a lot different. And that's why I decided to run, because I love this area so much. And people here where I am in California are feeling left behind. And you're right. They want us to leave, to not come here. But we need to step up and fight, because it's worth fighting for.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to leave, and we are hearing, and that's exactly what they want. They want us to just leave and be quiet. So tell us a little bit. Why did you decide to move from Connecticut to California?
But yeah, so my wife works at the Children's Hospital. So she got offered a dream position out here. She's a nurse practitioner. It was her first job at a grad school. She worked in pediatric neurosurgery at Valley Children's. And yeah, that brought us out here to the Central Valley. They flew her out here. She came back home and she said, "That's where I want to be. That's, it's perfect." And I said, "All right, let's go out there." And
And
we've fallen in love with this area since we got here.
you are a former public school teacher turned business owner. You have a card shop in the Central Valley. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was a high school history teacher in the public schools, and I also taught in the Catholic schools right before I moved out here. Since I came out here, started doing an online business with sports card and collectibles, and it's since turned into a store here in Clovis, California, and it's been going well. We've been open for a little over a year now. We just had our 1 year celebration in August, and things have been going well.
Well, good for you. I
Thank
bet you'd have a lot of things, or strong opinions about what's happening in the schools right now, especially in California. The latest law down coming from high in Sacramento is that all children have to be vaccinated, forcibly so, in the public school system. Do you have any reaction to that, to the vaccine mandates?
Yeah, so I'm not a fan of mandates. I think COVID's real. It's out there. It's unfortunate that we have to go through this. I don't believe in mandates. I think people have the right to choose whether or not they want to get vaccinated. If you want to get vaccinated, you should get vaccinated. If you don't, that's your right. That's your choice. I don't think the government should be making medical decisions for people, especially in children. There's been very little scientific data, and actually all the scientific data points to the fact that children are very unlikely to spread COVID, and they're very unlikely to really catch it. And if they do catch it, the survival rates is like 99.97%. So it's about as good as it gets. It's actually better than the seasonal flu. So, we don't have any long-term data on these vaccines. A lot of people are comparing it to, well, we already mandate the polio vaccine. We already mandate the smallpox. We already mandate all these vaccines. We have decades and decades of medical data and studies that show the effectiveness of those vaccines. This one is relatively new, so we don't really know all of the effects on younger children. And right now, there's not much benefit for them, medical benefit for them really to get it. If they're vulnerable and they want to get it and their parents feel they should, that's all right. But I have a problem with the government basically forcing this down people's throats. I think that's not really the place of the government. And yeah, so I've been pretty much against mandates throughout this entire thing.
Well, and what about the harm of the vaccines that we're hearing about the deaths that are coming in the wake of people getting the vaccine? That's been not reported on, and certainly there's more information to learn.
Yeah, especially in younger children, there was a lot of issues with cardiovascular issues, cardiology issues with the vaccine, especially in males, younger males. So I am vaccinated. My wife has an autoimmune disease. She has very bad rheumatoid arthritis, so I got vaccinated. I actually had a really bad reaction to the second shot, so I'm not thrilled about the prospect of getting booster shots, and I would prefer not to get one. And if somebody would try to force me, I would say no, I got my second shot and I actually had to go to the emergency room, had a pretty bad adverse reaction, a pretty big hypoimmuno response. Um, so yeah, I mean, we just don't have enough data on the effects of the drug yet. I think, that there's a benefit for people to get it if you're vulnerable and you want to get it. But like I said, we to force it on everybody without having, long-term studies, long-term data, and especially on the effects on children, it's a little irresponsible on our parts. Like I said, those other vaccines that everyone likes to compare it to, we have decades and decades of research and trials and all of this. So we kind of have a good track record there. This is still a relatively unknown vaccine. And yeah, there's been a lot of hesitancy to report some adverse reactions. And, we're hitting the 70-80% vaccination rates and cases are still going up. So there's something to say. They keep saying everybody's got to be vaccinated, but we have a lot of people vaccinated, so theoretically the cases should be going down, but we're experiencing still a rise in cases. So I mean, I think there's other things we need to do better of. People are concerned, take the proper precautions, but forcing people into something that they don't feel comfortable with, it's tough when you get the government making medical decisions for people.
Well, the vaccine mandate is just one of the things that Newsom seems to be coming down hard on Californians after the recall failure. It seems like it's getting worse for you down there. And so, what are you planning to do if you do unseat your incumbent, who is Jim Costa? He has
Yes.
been holding that seat since 2012, longtime Democrat. I just read that a new bill he passed or is hoping to, or introduce new legislation he introduced, is more than $200 million to build and expand water storage projects in California. So he's a big spender. He's got some, I guess that's his solution to the water drought, which I wanted to talk to you about as well. But going back to these strong laws, they're not laws, they're mandates that Newsom is imposing on Californians, maybe because he wants to get back at them for trying to boot him out of office. I don't know. Um, that is just one of them, the vaccine mandates, and he's ruling with an iron fist. He also recently approved for the $15 billion climate change bill. And this was in September during a visit to the Sequoia National Park, where he surveyed the Kings Canyon National Park's complex fire. And this is in Newsom's own words. Since 2020, 6 of the 7 largest wildfires have occurred in California's history. 2.35 million acres have burned. If we stay on this track, our children will inherit a world with 8 degrees higher temperature than they have today. I don't know where he gets this number of 8 degrees. He's certainly not quoting any scientist. But
Uh,
what is your reaction to, what are
well,
you going to do? Why should people look to you for change in California?
well, for a couple reasons. One, the recall was a statewide issue. It was a state voted on by the state. So Newsom got lucky in the fact that he was saved by far left voters in LA and San Francisco. They racked up a lot of votes there. But if you actually look at the results, this is California, so we have election months. We don't have election days here. So they're actually still counting votes, which is bizarre because it's supposed to be more technologically advanced. I don't know why it takes a month to count all the votes. But if you actually look at the data from where I am in the Central Valley, California, the recall did really well here. This is a part of California that's, like I said, a lot different than the LA, San Francisco, and even San Diego parts of California. This is a farming rural area, very conservative, very family based. And people should look here because if we're going to make inroads and fight back in California, it's going to start in the Central Valley because this is where people are fed up the most. It looks like all three counties in the 16th Congressional District and the district itself are going to have voted yes on the recall. And that's a significant development. Merced County, which is a very pivotal county in this district, one that we need to win if we're going to beat Jim Costa, voted 11 points for Joe Biden in the presidential election, and they are on track to pass the recall by 3 to 4 points. And that is a huge shift. I mean, you got to think a lot of those people that voted for Joe Biden are kind of fed up, and they voted yes on that recall. So if we're going to make gains, it's going to start here in these parts of California. So people need to look to this area, and if we want to fight back, and let's be honest, the Nancy Pelosi's majority is really slim in the House. We flip a seat like this that's never been held by a Republican in the current way it's been. So it was redistricted in 2010. There's a good chance Nancy Pelosi's not the Speaker of the House anymore. And we have the data to show that this is a very winnable seat. We had a really good fundraising quarter, $400,000 cash on hand, which is really, really good for a Republican at this state in the race. We're the only viable option to take down Jim. So if people want to have an impact in fighting back, not just in California, but for the country, it starts here in a district like this. Because if we beat Jim Costa, we get him out of there, there's a good chance Nancy Pelosi's not Speaker of the House. And I can use the power of my office to start influencing leaders in California to make better decisions. You talked about the wildfire issues. Well, there's a lot of things going on here. A lot of it is the fact that, Governor Newsom's been screaming climate change, climate change, climate change, and that's all the issues that are going on in California. And listen, I'm not here to talk about if climate change is real and climate change isn't real. What I'm here to talk about is they're not doing things. If climate change is real and it's one of the leading causes, they're still not taking the proper actions to help stop the fires. The fact is they don't manage the forests anymore. My uncles lived in California for decades. And they used to manage the forest. They used to rake the forest floors, get rid of all the debris that is right for, when you drop a match in that stuff, it just lights. It's hot, especially in the parts of California where I'm at. They don't do that anymore because the environmentalists have fought against it. They don't want you to rake the forest. But since they stopped doing that, it's no coincidence that wildfires have become more frequent and a lot worse because that stuff just burns and it burns fast. And President Trump came out here a couple of years ago when he was in office, when we were having a lot of fires, and he talked about that. And the media made fun of him and criticized it. And then subtly under the rug, they started to admit, hey, maybe he's onto something here. Maybe we do need to rake the forests more. And they're also depriving the region I'm in of water. So not only are we not properly managing the forests, our water is being diverted. A lot of it's getting dumped out into the ocean, 79 to 80% of it. So this area is incredibly dry. The forests are filled with dead debris and it's ripe for burning. And that's why we're seeing the wildfires in the extreme scenarios we have right now. It's not solely become a climate change like the governor says. So they're not giving everybody the full facts. And it's unfortunate because, people people are losing their homes, people are losing their businesses to these fires, and it can be prevented.
Right. Well, Newsom's not giving any facts. In fact, he told the reporters at this press conference where he announced this $15 billion bill, and that's billion, that's 9 zeros. It's a lot of money. We can't even imagine how much money that is. But he told these reporters that what they're going to do with that money is build more innovation, hire more personnel. They're going to build more technologies. How is that going to help limit wildfires? Like what you are saying about cleaning up the forest makes a lot more sense than inventing new technology and hiring a lot more people to analyze why climate is somehow creating more and more extreme weather.
If that money was going towards cleaning up the forest, I would say it's a good thing, but that money's not going towards forest management. So we're going to just have a bunch of people sitting around saying, whoa, is it the effect of climate change? Well, that's not really going to solve the issue. And, the governor is notorious for making up his own facts and hiding the science. To go back on the COVID thing, we've been beat over the head, not just in California, but across the country with, the lockdowns are the science, the masks are the science. And, listen, if it actually is the science, then maybe we should do it. But the problem is we've never seen the science. And Governor Newsom himself was asked, well, do you have the science on, that supports the lockdowns, that supports the mask mandates? And he says, well, we have it, but, it's really, really complicated. So we don't want to show it to the public because they might get confused. That's not a sufficient enough answer. And I think people have a right to question why they haven't been showed the evidence. Because if the science is there, show it to us. And a lot of people, their worries would be alleviated. But the fact that they're hiding it and saying, well, it's very complicated, people should question that. We need to see the science. In fact, a lot of the science we've seen directly contradicts everything they've pushed. The effectiveness of masks, whether or not they really are effective stopping the virus. Lockdowns, we know, a lot of science shows the lockdowns really didn't have any effect on stopping the spread of the virus. A state like Florida that's been open for over a year now, they're actually faring far better in terms of hospitalizations and deaths. And here we are in California. We were locked down, some of the harshest in the country. The science told us to do so, supposedly. And it didn't really work. It didn't set us apart from those places. But yeah, $15 million. The problem with that money, like you said, is it's not going to what needs to be done. They want to use climate change because they have a lot invested in green technologies and all that kind of alternative stuff. So there's an agenda at play here. But if that 15 billion was going towards forest management, I would say that's a good idea. But it's not. It's going towards more just wasteful nonsense is what I'm going to call it.
Yeah, and more people need to be talking about it, and like you, telling the public what really needs to be done, because they're just not hearing it. They're not hearing it through the mainstream news, and they're certainly not hearing it from the governor himself. But as a small business owner, let's talk a little bit about your experience from the lockdowns. How did they impact you? How is your business doing now? And what are you seeing across the area in the Central Valley? You're in Madera County, is that correct?
I live in Madera County. My store is in Fresno County. My district is Madera County, parts of Fresno County, and all of Merced County. So I was fortunate in that a lot of my business during the onset of the pandemic was online. I actually opened up the store when we first had our first openings during the pandemic. I was fortunate because a lot of the sports card and memorabilia business goes online. A lot of my core business things I do with eBay. I do, some Facebook business. And so I was lucky in that regards, and I opened up later on. But I meet with small business owners all the time, particularly restaurant owners, and they're struggling. Our restaurants have been decimated. These are people who spent their whole lives investing in these restaurants, and they were told, well, you can't be open because restaurants are super spreaders. But meanwhile, we could go to Walmart, we can go to Costco. And the science actually shows now that restaurants weren't super spreaders at all. So they're struggling. I was up in Delhi a month or so ago, meeting with a restaurant owner, owns the Elegant Bulls, name's Frank. So if I send him this video and he can get a shout out. It's a great restaurant. He's 90 years old and he's working in the kitchen himself now because he was hit so hard by the pandemic. They're struggling, and now they're having difficulty getting workers because in California we've made it we've disincentivized work. So a lot of people, all these stores here, he's like, man, I can't open up on Mondays anymore. I don't have enough employees. And that's a common theme as we talk to small business owners in all aspects, not just the restaurant industry. So it was really tough on people out here, and a lot of people were fed up. And I think that's why you saw the recall numbers in this part of California overwhelmingly supporting the recall. The recall began here. The movement began in the Central Valley, and it took hold. And yes, it failed on a statewide level. But that's because they did a good job of getting those far left votes in LA and San Francisco to save them. But a guy like Jim Costa, who I'm running against, who runs around and parades himself as a moderate, he calls himself a blue dog. He's not a moderate. He votes 91% of the time with Pelosi, or with with radical socialists. He votes 91% of the time with radical socialists like AOC, and he votes 99% of the time with Nancy Pelosi. So he's pretty much Pelosi's lapdog. And in the Central Valley, those policies are decimating this area. And people here are desperate for change. They've been trying for a long time, and we're very confident that we're going to get it done.
Yeah, and it's across the state. I have friends who are business owners down in Southern California, and they too cannot find workers to fill to work at these businesses. So these properties are just sitting empty.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
and I think. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. No, California, look at the unemployment rates for around the country. California's right there at the top. I mean, we were the first last month. We dropped back down to second, but we have all these policies in place that are really disincentivizing work. And we're one of the biggest reasons we're keeping the national unemployment rate so high, because California, we're still hovering 7%, seven something percent, and that's unacceptable.
So you talked a little bit about people are ready for change. After when we think about these voters who have voted in someone like Jim Costa for the last decade, why now do you think people are hungry for change? I mean, we can say 2 million voters voted for Larry Elder in the recall election. Um, that's a lot. That's promising. I think it may have been higher than 2 million. It wasn't enough, but that's a lot of people who want someone else in charge. What's your sense of this change that you're seeing, and why is it happening now? Obviously the policies are crippling the economy and crippling people's livelihoods. But where do you think, what's sparking this change?
Well, to be honest with you, this is, like I said, this is not what people think of when they think of California. This is a heavy agricultural community. The ag industry is the lifeblood of the entire Central Valley economy. I mean, most people don't realize, but 70% of the fruits and vegetables throughout the country come from the Central Valley in California. And we're being deprived of water. Okay, so our farmers are losing, the lands are being fallowed, and we are in a desperate situation. I just talked to a farmer yesterday. He said, if we have another dry winter, we're going to see things we've never seen before, because the water allocations are so low right now. I mean, some people are getting 0% water allocations. Our reservoirs, which were built to sustain 5 years of drought, we're only in year 2 of a dry year. They're already empty because they're just dumping the water out into the ocean. So people here are fed up and ripe for change, because this is the backbone of the Central Valley economy. And this is an issue that's going to affect the entire nation, because if our farmers can't grow the fruits and vegetables, we're going to become dependent on other countries for our food. And people around the country need to start taking note of this, because it's going to hit them in the pocketbooks. They're going to be paying more for food at the grocery store because we have to get it from other countries. So people here are desperate. If the agriculture industry collapses in the Central Valley, it's going to take everything with it. It is the lifeblood of the Central Valley. And unfortunately, it doesn't make up as much as the state GDP as it once did, because of places like Silicon Valley and all these new firms. So there's people in Sacramento and LA, they don't really, they don't care about the farming community, and they're thinking, it's only 2% of the state's GDP. What do we need it for? And people have to understand the effect it's going to have. I mean, like I said, this is 70% fruits and vegetables come from the Central Valley, California. And it's going to affect this entire country. So people here recognize that, and they're desperate for change. I mean, it's because their livelihoods are on the line. Their family livelihoods are on the line.
Well, and the people in the local community of the Central Valley, I believe in July, they went an entire month without water. Some people did because their wells dried up. So
Yeah.
this is first world problems here. I mean, it's inconceivable as
What people don't realize is so a lot of the water that's meant to come here in the Central Valley is being diverted away, most of it under the guise of environmentalism to protect species of fish that, in some cases, the Delta smelt. They've only collected 2 Delta smelt on record since 2018. So they've been doing this restoration of it for decades, and the species hasn't recovered. And it's been used to justify taking water away from the valley. So water that's meant to come and recharge the aquifer isn't coming here. So farmers have had no choice. If we're not getting surface water, if we're not getting water from the dams, the only way they can grow their crops is they have to pump from the ground. And because the water allocations have been so low, they've been pumping more and more, and wells are running dry because the water's not getting recharged because it's all been taken away from the Central Valley. Uh, People think that the farmers are using all the water. 50% of California's water actually goes to environmental causes, 40% to the farmers, and 10% goes for like city usage. And unfortunately, a lot of the water that gets diverted away from the valley, I said earlier, 79, 80% of it gets dumped into the ocean. So good water that could be used to, for people to feed, to grow crops, it's getting dumped into the ocean under the guise of environmentalism. That has to change. We all want to protect the environment, but the effects on the environment when there's no water in the Central Valley is going to be just as devastating as the effects on these fishes. So it's kind of crazy stuff.
So crazy. So what is your solution? What
Well,
kind of
one of the
legislation
solutions
would you introduce?
Well, there's a lot of governmental regulations that have been enacted by the EPA. So the EPA is a non-elected; these are non-elected bureaucrats, and they're making decisions that have the effect of law. So the San Joaquin Valley Restoration Act, the Central Valley Project. The EPA is in charge of a lot of this stuff. What I want to do is, at the very least, I want to have Congress, the representatives, vote on where the water is going, because I believe it shouldn't be unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats that are deciding where we're diverting the water and if the Central Valley is getting water. It should be the people, the representatives of the people that vote on it. So I'd like to see Congress vote on water allocations and some re-examine some of those regulations and reassert their authority over the EPA. I'd also like to fund water storage projects. Temperance Flat Dam, Sites Reservoirs is one that we're trying to fund. Raising some of the existing dams like Shasta Dam. Jim Costa is supposed to be a farmer, and his biggest priority has been the bullet train that's been going on for decades. And now we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars that bullet train is going to cost. So rather than he wants to put 32 billion more to the train in nowhere. That's basically we don't even know where it's going to go now. He wants $32 billion more for it when that money could be going to build Temperance Flat Dam, which is a much more pressing issue. It's no secret we've had dry years, but what people don't get is 2 of the last 4 in California have actually been extremely wet. And if we had more water storage, if we had more buckets, we'd save more of that water. So it's crazy that we aren't taking it. We need to take advantage of when it does rain, and we haven't done that. And it's unfortunate. So I'd like to get that bill. And I also would like to use the power of my office as a sitting congressman to put pressure on state water boards and state leaders to change what's going on. A sitting congressman can have a lot of influence. He can go to water board meetings and tell the water board, don't do this. Don't enact this water cut. Don't enact this regulation. And Jim hasn't done that. And I want to be a voice at the federal level, but I also want to use my office to pressure state lawmakers and bureaucrats into making better decisions. And use the power of the media. Like I said, most people around the country need to understand why the Central Valley needs water. It's going to hit their pocketbooks too.
Yeah. Well, you've heard it here, folks. David Giglio has a plan. I want to touch on inflation and talk a little bit about the uptick, or what the head of the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, says may be increased from maybe 2%, maybe now it's going to be 4%. We're talking about millions, billions, trillions of dollars that the Democrats are trying to the spending bills that the Democrats are trying to pass right now. Your thoughts on where we're headed here?
I don't have much faith in the economic policies of Janet Yellen. I mean, I think she's just I don't know where her head's at, but inflation is the worst tax you could have. The Democrats and President Biden have gone around his promise. I will not raise taxes on anyone making 400,000 or less. Well, guess what? Inflation affects the lowest level earners the most. Those are the ones whose salaries are not keeping up with the rising cost of goods. They are being hurt the most. Inflation is a tax. And right now we're getting record increases in inflation. And, Jim Costa had originally said, I'm not going to support the $3.5 trillion spending bill and then Nancy whipped him into shape, and now he's all for it. So it's just another example of him leaving his constituents behind, because the Central Valley, the counties in my are some of the, it's no secret. You look at the economic data; they're some of the poorest in California, and the people here are going to be hurt the most by inflation. So inflation is a tax on all, and then also included in that is a mileage tax. Who's a mileage tax going to hurt the most? Lower level earners whose salaries aren't keeping pace with the rising cost of stuff. So when Janet Yellen's talking to us about transitory inflation, she's lying to herself, and she's lying to the people. This is a serious issue. It's having dramatic results on people. I mean, gas is. I mean, in some parts of California, we're over five. We're like five and a half now for gas. So people are really getting hurt. And you could say you're not raising taxes all you want, but income tax alone isn't the only type of taxation. So that talking point is a falsehood. And we have to stop spending money we don't have. The government needs to learn how to spend money smartly and wisely, rather than just taking our tax dollars and basically lighting them on fire.
Well, the GOP also needs to stand its ground. And I think Mitch McConnell just agreed to a compromise with the Democrats to raise the debt ceiling. So, you're up against a lot, trying to clean up the swamp that is California state, and then heading to the swamp that is Washington, D.C. But I believe you do have the fortitude and the spirit for it. I'm so grateful for you. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to touch on that one quick thing. I have signed a pledge with U.S. term limits that if I get elected and there's a term limit bill or amendment that comes up, I will vote in favor of it. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. We have career politicians that have been in D.C. and Sacramento 30, 40 years, and they have lost track of why they're there. And I stood up and decided to get in this race because I said, we need people that want to go there and actually want to get something done. The status quo isn't working, and the everyday American is suffering because politicians are more concerned about staying in Washington, getting rich, and keeping that cushy seat. And that's not what I'm all about. I don't think my wife would want me in Washington for 30 and 40 years. So I want to go there and I want to get some things done. And we need to start thinking about electing new leaders that have that mindset, because this career politician and this status quo, it's not working for any of us on both sides of the aisle. And we need fresh faces.
Well, and to get elected, we need to have free and fair elections. And something we didn't talk about today is election integrity, but it's such an important issue, especially in California, where now Governor Newsom has passed the law that universal mail-in ballots are to begin in California, I believe, maybe starting with the midterms, but he did pass that law. We have it up here in Washington state, and I'm not sure we will ever have another free election until the universal mail-in ballot law is reversed. But your thoughts on how would you even reverse the law of mail-in ballots once it's set?
I mean, I would like to see legal challenges that are going to get to the Supreme Court. I would like the Supreme Court to rule on ballot harvesting, the legality of it or all. I personally believe ballot harvesting should be illegal. I think it's a dirty practice. I think it should be illegal. And I agree, it's tainting our elections. This universal, we need to clean up voter rolls. We have to pressure. People need to go out and get involved. Go to your county commissioner meetings. Go to your local city council meetings. Demand voter rolls are cleaned up. Universal mail-in balloting wouldn't be as big as an issue if voter rolls were cleaned and maintained properly. But the fact of the matter is, voter rolls are heavily outdated. They don't do a good job of updating them. And most of the issues are in the bigger cities where a lot of the votes are. So when you have universal mail-in balloting, when you have outdated voter rolls, they're just sending them to people that shouldn't be on the voter rolls that moved away. So there's addresses that are getting 6 or 7 mail-in ballots of people that no longer live there. And we're supposed to believe that those ballots get thrown away and not sent in. So one of the things we have to do, demand action, put pressure on your local, your county clerks, your election supervisors, your board of supervisors. Go to the meetings, demand voter rolls be cleaned up. We need the courts to rule on ballot harvesting. And one of the things I've been saying to people, it's no secret the Democrats have a supermajority in California. In the legislature, they hold the governorship. The Republicans they could not show up to work in Sacramento, and it would be the same as any other day. They'll still do whatever they want to do because there's so little of them. Democrats only like things when it works in their favor. And I personally hate ballot harvesting. I think it's terrible. I think it should be illegal. But the Democrats like it because they're the ones that have mastered it and they're using it to their advantage to wipe people out. So if they're going to use it and it's going to be legal, we have to use it to claw back. And you're going to see that if we start doing it and we start becoming effective at it, they're not going to like it anymore and they're going to want to get rid of it. So we have to, kind of use their own method against them here to claw back. And then once we're back, we can change the rules. But until then, let's try and get that ballot harvesting done. And then let's go, like I said, put pressure on your local leaders. Clean up the voter rolls. That is the biggest issue with universal mail-in balloting. It is unclean voter rolls, and they're more likely to not to be unclean in big cities where there's lots of votes. So, if people got to take action, and that's kind of why I decided to stand up. I said I could sit here and complain and feel crappy all I want, but if I don't stand up and try and do something, then I'm just part of the issue. That's what they want. So we got to stand up and fight back.
Yes, the hour is upon us to take action. And many are. To your point about people wanting change, there is a burgeoning movement across the country in deep blue states like Washington and California, where people are getting together and forming election integrity caucuses, forming election integrity groups where they meet and they go out and canvass. There was a woman in Arizona, as you likely know, Liz Harris, who canvassed thousands of doors from back in December to the present. And we have the Arizona audit happening. We have audits here happening in Washington. Audits are in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Michigan. So it's happening. And the momentum just needs to continue. And I think with people like you beginning to speak out and run for office, doing what everybody needs to do who wants change, that is the first step. Like you said, get involved at the local, state, and national level.
Yeah. We have a great group, Election Integrity Project. They've done a lot of work in the Central Valley. They're doing work all around California. They are challenging voter rolls and they're challenging the legality of ballot harvesting. They have a case that, it's probably, if it gets resolved, it's going to knock on the Supreme Court's steps soon. So, they're very hopeful. They're going to keep appealing until they get that case heard by the Supreme Court. I'm hopeful that eventually the Supreme Court finally decides they want to take up the issue of ballot harvesting and they want to rule on it, because I think that's an issue that we need some weigh-in from the justices in the Supreme Court and have them finally tell us once and for all, is it legal, is it not legal? So Election Integrity Project is a group. If you're in California, take a look at them. They have other operations in other states. So yes, people are getting involved. We have people we're putting pressure on our county board of supervisors. Like I said, the conservative movement is still strong in the Central Valley. So we do control a lot of seats on the board of supervisors in the counties here. So this is the time where we can make some things happen, but it takes people to step up and put pressure on these people. Nobody wants to really rock the boat when you've been in politics for a long time. But when the average person starts showing up and they start speaking out, they know that, hey, it's time I got to do something. Everybody should want faith in the electoral process restored, Democrats and Republicans alike. And there's things we can do. Voter ID is one of them. The Democrats have made voter ID kind of the boogeyman, but polls are emphatic over and over again. It doesn't even matter if it's done by leftist polling firms. We're talking 65 to 80% in some polls support voter ID, and minorities overwhelmingly support voter ID. So the Democrats can sit here and claim, oh, it's suppression, all you want, but that argument's not resonating. The media could push it all they want. They could fight it, but every American's Democrats, Republican, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, they're all saying the same thing. We want voter ID because we just want to know that our elections are legitimate. And it's a concern that both sides of the aisle should be fighting for.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And we have here at the New American, we have readers and viewers across the nation. So if you are in the Central Valley area, please go and look up David's website. It's davidforthevalley.com. If you're interested in hearing or learning more about what he stands for and what he promises he's going to get done if he is elected to Congress in 2022. Well, David, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to talking to you.
I got to work on the lighting in this room. It's a little dark, but I'm glad you had me on. I enjoyed talking with you, and keep up the good fight and keep working hard. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.